Jean-Michel Grand is the Director of Action Against Hunger UK and joins me now. Jean-Michel, thank you again for your time. Since we last spoke, things have even got worse. I noticed, and it was quietly sort of slipped in there, I might have missed it, that the UK has apparently pledged 4.25 million pounds in sexual and reproductive aid for women in Gaza. I guess that's in recognition, because I remember from when we last spoke, you talked about women not being able to breastfeed their babies because they have such a lack of nutrients themselves. And of course, they're pregnant, and what that says to their pregnancies as well, and that has been recognized. But when it comes to just getting food, the pictures, the stories of people eating leaves, drinking out of puddles, how much worse has it got since we last spoke?
And good evening, Trisha. The overall situation has continued to deteriorate and is very, very critical. And as you mentioned, what we are really worried about is the deterioration of the nutrition status of pregnant and lactating women, young children, infants, and that's really has deteriorated. And we think that around 90% are relying on eating less than one food group per day. And as you can imagine, most of that is not very high nutrition values, and children are very, very sick. All of them, or most of them, have one disease, and I think 2/3 of the young children have diarrheas. And interesting what you mentioned about the breastfeeding and the huge issue that it concerns. One of the major factors as well affecting young mothers are the trauma. The trauma which is affecting their breastfeeding as well. And that obviously, this trauma, the fear of not being able to feed, the fear for their own life, is really, really one of the major factors in population in Gaza and every population living in a warfare.
Yeah, I just remember breastfeeding my children. And if I was stressed because of work or anything like that, if you just got normal, everyday, boring stresses, your milk doesn't come down. And that's if you're fully nutritionally rested and living in a peaceful society. So with the stress of the trauma of what they're seeing, of not being able to eat, you can't say just give them formula because there's no water. With all of that on top, even if you can have milk, getting the letdown and things like that, I'm just thinking about it. It's how the hell do they do it? What can be done?
I think first of all, as you mentioned, let's speak about food. Fruits are not available in the market. Meat is extremely rare and at very, very high price. The same there is no eggs, dairy, cheese, milk, sweets. All that has almost disappeared from the market. And when it's available, it's at very, very high prices. So people, what they rely on mostly, wheat, rice, and canned foods. And they are eating directly from the cans. We have our team I've seen, and they are reporting to us that many people are making flour from animal foods. And I think nobody is really thinking about hygiene or condition or expiry date. It's a survival strategy. So what are they doing as well in terms of they skip the meals? Most people have reduced their meal to one meal a day. They reduce the portion. They give priority to the children. And so it's really, really, since last time that we spoke, I mentioned that we are going towards the risk of famine in a few months' time. And the situation today that we are saying is we are still in the path, unfortunately, of a deteriorating situation day after day. And as I mentioned last time, there is nowhere safe in Gaza, and we are very, very concerned about this potential offensive military operation in Rafah, where more than 1 million people are cattle there.
So what? Just explain to me. What do you understand why UNRWA has suspended aid? They're saying the desperate behaviour of hungry and exhausted people is preventing the safe and regular passage of our trucks. This is according to UNRWA. She added that she was very wary of how to explain this so as not to make it sound like they're blaming people or describing these things as criminal acts. I think again we forget it's a little bit different about Sainsbury's. Well, to give people, here's a way of putting it, Jean-Michel. I'm just thinking, do you remember during lockdown when there was no supply and people were fighting over toilet rolls?
Mm.
I mean, can you imagine not having food for your children and not having eaten and skipping meals? People become desperate.
It is an act of desperation. And indeed, it's becoming an heroic work to go and deliver food assistance. And many of the trucks, or several of the trucks, have been attacked. And you say it's not criminal. It's really act of desperation. I just had received report from our teams, and every single distribution that we are doing in Gaza, because we succeed to distribute small quantities, but still regularly we are distributing some food, it's extremely tense. People are tense. They are so afraid not to be able to get. Our team are under huge pressure by people who are desperate when they are doing the distribution. And that is affecting all organizations and all aid assistance. Here again, another sign that people are desperate and they are ready to do anything to save their family. And we will do the same. You mentioned the COVID period. Everybody, when you're scared with your family, you're ready to do anything to feed them.
Yeah. And just talk to us about the effects, the long-term effects of starvation or vitamin deprivation that children are currently going through. And as you say, it can get even worse. We tend to think, all right, they haven't got any food. Right, finally, God willing, that these, that there's a ceasefire and food is allowed in, and then everything's okay. It's not that easy, is it? There are health implications, long-term health implications to starvation.
Exactly. There are short-term consequences in terms of children can become wasted and therefore at a very, very high risk of mortality, of dying. But also there is long-term, the lack of dietary diversity and the reduced consumption in a population which was already experiencing a high prevalence of anemia, especially for pregnant and breastfeeding women, is likely to lead to a kind of low birth weights and negatively impact the nutrition status of infants, and probably is going to potentially, when your children are stunted or malnourished on the longer term, it affect their own development. So we are here experiencing a huge humanitarian crisis today, but the long-term consequences for the future generation, for these young children and for these young mothers are incredibly concerning.
Yeah. And when we talk about food, we forget about water. Do you know what the situation is with regards getting fresh water to drink?
Yes, water we know, because as I can again say, we are distributing, we are still succeeding to do a little bit of water tracking, and whenever there is water that we can buy in bottle, the north is extremely very concerning. We have little information about how people have access to water. The data that we have collected shows us that people are living with 1 liter per day in average. 1 liter for all their needs per person. And I'm not speaking only about drinking water. All water is around limited to 1 liter. It's a catastrophe. And so access to safe and clean water is a serious concern as well. And as I mentioned at the beginning, 2/3 of the young children have diarrhea, which is mostly related as well to poor quality water and limited access to water. It's a very dramatic situation, and it's very, very clear today that more than ever, we need the blockade need to be lifted so that food, water, medicines can go and people can have access to it. And secondly, that there is this offensive military operation in Rafah, they should be prevented.
Yeah.
As well as we have to have the hostage being released. And as everybody now is calling, there has to be an immediate ceasefire.
Yeah. It strikes me as well, and you know, you're talking about the children and people in general having diarrhea, and then of course you think, well, there are no medicines, so even children or people who had pre-existing all sorts of things, from asthma to diabetes to heart problems. You know, every society has those health problems. So you've got a whole lot of people, including children in the West or here. A child gets diarrhea, you can just go to the pharmacy, go to the chemist and get the drugs and off you go. But when you've got no medication and something like diarrhea, and then you have no water, you can't replace the fluids, that is a really serious situation.
It is, and children are very high risk of dying of diarrhea, and there's few, if non-medical facilities, but also there is no proper hygiene condition. People rush out of their house. They are living in tents on the tents, and so there's no toilet or facilities for them as well. So it's a massive sanitation and health issue that we are speaking, especially with almost 1 million people gathered together, cornered together in Rafah. So the situation, the risk of infection is very, very massive. And no pharmacy, obviously.
Yeah, we forget about the, you know, people all being bundled together. I mean, I'm just thinking now, COVID doesn't, I'm sure COVID hasn't said, okay, well, we're going to skip this population. All of those things, like even a common cold, when you're that run down, when you're that ill, can be a death sentence.
It can, and it's the disease can spread very, very quickly. And you know that we are not speaking yet of cases of cholera, but the whole circumstances means that the risk of potentially having cholera is realistic. So many people crowded in the same area with almost no hygiene condition. I think that's it's a serious concern about a very quick deterioration of the situation, which can spiral out, and concerning that can spiral out of control, even if humanitarian assistance might be allowed at some stage. So that if it's too delayed, we are going to be in a situation which is going to become beyond catastrophic.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking of when, again, God willing, that there's some kind of ceasefire, you know, aid in meaningful amounts is permitted to come through. You, again, if children are so malnourished, or people are, you can't just give them a full meal, can you? There's got to be the whole refeeding. I mean, I know in many war areas, I mean, you're just as likely to die if you've been very severely malnourished for a very long time, and somebody just gives you something to. It has to be planned refeeding, which takes so much, you know, and what they eat and how they eat it. It takes. I mean, when I think about it, when you actually apply your mind to it, it's a huge problem.
It is, and that's one of the area of expertise that Action Against Hunger has. Worldwide, we are treating around 600,000 severely malnourished children per year, and it is a process. It's a medical process where we need to have special treatment for the children with this ready-to-use therapeutic food. So, and it takes 2 to 3 months for a severely malnourished child to be treated, assuming that we have access to the child on a weekly basis. And if this child has some complication, this child will need to go to hospital. to receive proper medical treatment. So if the child, they receive a part of the treatment for 1 week and then nothing for 2 or 3 weeks, and that's not going to help. So the child who are severely malnourished are really, they require a treatment and having a regular access to them. And that's not happening at all. It's impossible for the moment in the whole Gaza area.